For analysts at the Pentagon and NATO headquarters, it's already being called the Bakhmut turning point. 1 week ago, on one of the most brutal sections of the front lines, where for months Russian command has practiced its notorious human wave tactics, something happened that completely changed the rules of the game. The Kremlin's plan to exhaust Ukrainian forces by accepting staggering losses of its own infantry didn't just fail, it was publicly and technologically humiliated. The West witnessed a small team of Ukrainian engineers, armed with cutting-edge technology and unconventional thinking, turn the tactic of meat grinder assaults into a pointless act of mass suicide. Behind the scenes, a quiet but confident optimism is spreading through the alliance. Ukraine didn't just defeat the enemy on the battlefield. It demonstrated an asymmetric response capable of fundamentally altering the very philosophy of this war. 1 week ago, under the gray Donbass dawn, a system was deployed on the Bakhmut flank that had previously only existed in classified presentations to NATO military officials. It was the culmination of a project codenamed Sipelgapesa, Estonian for Ant Hill, a joint venture between Ukrainian military engineers and a team of Estonian IT specialists from the Cybernetics Center, Cybexer Technologies. The project's objective was crystal clear: to create a robotic defensive network capable of stopping mass infantry assaults without direct human involvement on the firing line, thereby preserving the most valuable resource of all, the lives of Ukrainian soldiers. The deployment operation was given the code name the Iron Swarm, and had been in preparation for nearly 3 months. NATO intelligence, using satellite imagery and signals intelligence, had been constantly monitoring Russian tactics in this sector. It was established that the command of Russia's 58th Combined Arms Army was systematically using Storm Z assault units, largely composed of ex-convicts, as expendable assets. They were driven onto Ukrainian positions wave after wave, with minimal support, to expose firing positions and drain the defenders' ammunition. A recent series of brutal assaults, where Russian forces managed to make minor advances at the cost of hundreds of lives per meter, played a decisive role in the decision to deploy the Iron Swarm. In Kiev and Brussels, the consensus was that the response shouldn't be symmetrical. It shouldn't get drawn into the meat grinder. It had to be asymmetric and technologically devastating. This is why the decision was made to deploy an experimental system capable of acting autonomously and ruthlessly. On the night of August 19th, at approximately 2:30 in the morning, under the cover of distracting artillery fire on distant targets, a group of Ukrainian Special Operations Forces moved into the gray zone. They weren't carrying rifles, but sealed containers. Inside were 12 small robotic platforms codenamed T-Rex. The weather conditions, low cloud cover and a moonless night, made their deployment virtually invisible to Russian drones. The engineering team supervising the deployment included the project's lead developer, John Cross, an Estonian prodigy in robotics and artificial intelligence, and his Ukrainian counterpart, a major in the Ukrainian armed forces with the call sign Constructor, who had previously worked in a leading Ukrainian IT cluster. They were the architects of the Swarm's unique decentralized command network. The first stage, placing and camouflaging the platforms, took less than 1 hour. 12 T-Rex units, 6 Hornet machine gun modules, 4 Creeper mine-laying systems, and 2 Fist loitering munitions vanished into the landscape of craters and debris, 200 meters ahead of the main Ukrainian trench line. The soldiers then withdrew to a fortified command bunker 500 meters from the front. It was there, in relative safety, that 2 operators would become the brains of the swarm. One was a platoon commander, a veteran of the battles for Kiev and Kharkiv, with the call sign Falcon. The other was a young soldier, Pixel, a professional esports player and game developer before the war. The silence from Moscow that met this news, after information about their failed attack leaked to pro-Kremlin Telegram channels, only confirms the gravity of the situation. In Western military circles, the event is already being called a technological Stalingrad for Russian infantry tactics. The successful use of robotic defense means the complete neutralization of Russia's single advantage, its willingness to accept horrific human losses. According to sources at SHAPE, several classified briefings were held within 24 hours of the operation, with representatives from DARPA and leading defense contractors. The main question: how quickly can this technology be scaled? To admit that a robotic system, developed by a small team of enthusiasts, proved more effective than entire armies is to admit a paradigm shift in warfare. But denying the obvious is also impossible. The Ukrainian command and their Western partners now have irrefutable proof. Battle recordings from the drone's cameras, data on enemy losses, and, most importantly, the saved lives of their own soldiers. Ukraine, meanwhile, is not rushing to show all its cards. Kiev understands it now holds a powerful asset, useful not just on the battlefield but in the information war. Confirming that human wave tactics can be easily neutralized deals a devastating blow to the morale of Russian troops and undermines the authority of their command. While nationalist meal bloggers try to spin a plausible narrative about engaging a full brigade of NATO mercenaries, a chorus of admiration is rising from the Western expert community. Independent analysts from the Institute for the Study of War, ISW, and the Royal United Services Institute, RUSI, are calling it a triumph of a Western defense philosophy that prioritizes the life of a soldier. The official Russian version, leaked through semi-official channels, appears absurd. In classified reports, the Russian MOD allegedly claimed that their assault groups ran into a pre-prepared, multi-layered mine trap and were ambushed from the flanks by superior enemy forces. But the wreckage of robotic platforms marked T-Rex found later on the battlefield, and the distinctive wounds on Russian soldiers caused by crossfire from low-to-the-ground platforms instantly debunk this version. Kiev's response has been firm. Ukraine's Minister of Defense stated clearly, "We will no longer play by the Kremlin's barbaric rules. For every attempt to overwhelm us with bodies, we will respond with technology. The life of every Ukrainian warrior is priceless, and we will use the world's most advanced developments to protect it. The era of winning a war simply by having more people is over forever." These words were met with a standing ovation in Western capitals. Many experts believe that with the arrival of such technologies, the Ukrainian army is shifting to a new, more effective defensive strategy. Ukraine is now acting proactively, eliminating enemy manpower before it can inflict serious damage. The Kremlin, in response, attempted to use diplomatic channels, accusing Ukraine and NATO of using inhumane robotic killing systems operating without human control. But Brussels responded with irony, pointing out that the Iron Swarm is controlled by human operators, unlike Russia's human wave tactics, which use humans like soulless robots. NATO reacted with a series of closed-door meetings. The success of the Iron Swarm was a powerful signal for the entire alliance. Ukraine had proven in practice that small, relatively inexpensive and intelligent systems can completely neutralize an enemy's numerical superiority. Operation Iron Swarm was not just an isolated success. It was part of a new strategy being developed by the Ukrainian command with Western support. The focus is no longer on holding at all costs, but on smart defense, attrition, and the technological annihilation of the enemy. It is not only a show of force, but a signal that the old model of conflict, based on static battles and grinding down manpower, is a thing of the past. The West must now realize Ukraine is no longer playing by Russia's imposed rules, and its every action will have consequences that cannot be ignored. The first hours after the Iron Swarm system was deployed in the command bunker near Bakhmut were filled with a tense, almost electric anticipation. For the Ukrainian operators and their Estonian mentors, this was the moment of truth. Successful tests on a training ground were one thing. A real battle against a desperate and numerous enemy was another entirely. News that the robotic network was combat-ready quickly reached analysis centers in Ramstein and Washington. The operation was being monitored in real time not just by Ukrainian generals, but by dozens of NATO specialists. At stake was not just the fate of a small section of the front, but the reputation of the entire Western concept of technological warfare. What happened next is already being studied in detail at military academies from West Point to Sandhurst. The very first Russian assault attempt, upon encountering the Iron Swarm, turned into a catastrophe for the attackers, vividly demonstrating the chasm between 21st century military thought and archaic Soviet-era tactics. Moscow, having sent its soldiers to the slaughter, received a ruthless and cold digital response. At approximately 4:30 in the morning, just as intelligence had predicted, the attack began. On the operator's monitors, connected to the T-Rex unit's thermal cameras, the gray, crater-pocked Earth came alive. Dozens of whitish figures began to emerge from the folds of the terrain. This was the first wave of Storm-Z moving in their usual pattern, without heavy equipment, in sparse formations, aiming to expose and suppress firing positions. They ran towards the Ukrainian trenches, expecting to hear the answering fire of rifles and machine guns. But the trenches were silent. This silence was the first element of psychological pressure. The attackers were clearly nervous. Their advance slowed. They couldn't understand why they weren't being met with fire. It was a violation of the familiar ritual of death they had grown accustomed to. "Let them get to 300 meters, came the calm voice of the operator commander, Falcon, in the bunker. When the lead groups of Russian stormtroopers crossed that invisible line, all hell broke loose. But it wasn't the familiar roar of battle. It was a calculated, cold, and merciless dance of the hornets, as one analyst later described it. The operator, Pixel, the former esports player, went to work first. His 6 Hornet machine gun modules, positioned in a checkerboard pattern, opened up a crossfire. This was nothing like the chaotic spray of infantry. The AI integrated into the system highlighted targets, calculated ballistics, and corrected fire in real time. Bullets flew from multiple directions, creating a lethal web from which there was no escape. The attackers fell without even understanding where the fire was coming from. Their return fire was aimed at the empty Ukrainian positions, while death came at them from the ground, from small, nearly invisible robotic platforms. The effect was staggering. The first wave was almost completely annihilated within minutes. The few who survived crawled back in panic, carrying with them the terror of an unseen and all-seeing enemy. The Russian command, apparently stunned by what was happening, made its second mistake. Concluding that the first wave had suppressed the main firing positions, they threw their reserves into the fight, this time reinforcing them with a BTR-82A armored personnel carrier. By their logic, the armored vehicle would clean up any remaining defenders. This was exactly what Falcon was waiting for. "Activating Fist," he commanded. 2 Fist loitering munitions, which had been hiding in deep craters, shot out to meet the armored vehicle. The operation was carried out with textbook surgical precision. First strike, blinding. The first Fist, controlled by Falcon, struck not the armor, but the BTR's vision blocks and optical instruments. The vehicle was instantly blinded, its turret spinning erratically, firing into the void. Second strike, decapitation. The second drone, approaching from the flank, hit the engine compartment precisely. Thick smoke billowed from the rear of the BTR, and it ground to a halt, becoming a helpless iron box. The rout was complete. The breakthrough attempt had failed, and the attackers' losses were catastrophic. According to Western intelligence, in 20 minutes of combat, the Russian side lost up to a company of infantry and a unit of armor. The Ukrainian side's losses, 0. 0 killed, 0 wounded. Realizing they were facing not a conventional defense, but something fundamentally different, the Russian command resorted to its final argument, a massive artillery barrage. Hundreds of mortar rounds and shells rained down on the gray zone where, as they finally understood, the source of their problems lay. On the monitors in the Ukrainian bunker, the ground began to heave. It was a critical moment. Could the swarm's decentralized network withstand a direct artillery impact? "Lost connection to Hornet 4. Direct hit," Pixel reported. "Creeper 2 has sustained damage to its drivetrain, but systems are active," Falcon replied. But it was here that the key advantage of the system, designed by the Estonian engineers, became apparent. The Iron Swarm was not a single organism. It was a decentralized mesh network. The loss of one or even several nodes did not cause the entire system to fail. The remaining drones instantly redistributed communication channels and combat tasks among themselves, continuing to operate as a single, cohesive unit. Moreover, while Russian artillery was plowing the empty field, the Ukrainian operators used this pause. Instant adaptation. Falcon, noticing a Russian group attempting to outflank them, commanded a surviving Creeper mine layer. It remotely deployed a small minefield, thwarting the flanking maneuver, saving lives. Most importantly, the entire personnel of the Ukrainian platoon were in a deep, fortified bunker, calmly watching as enemy artillery wasted precious shells on destroying empty space and inexpensive robotic platforms. When the artillery barrage subsided, the Russian side made one last desperate attack attempt, but they were met by the surviving and still merciless swarm. After taking more losses, the remnants of the assault groups finally retreated. Western analytical reports prepared in the immediate aftermath emphasized several key conclusions from this battle. the failure of human wave. Tactics. The Iron Swarm proved that against a robotic defense, such tactics are ineffective and lead only to colossal, one-sided losses. The value of a soldier's life. The Western concept, which prioritizes the preservation of personnel, was completely vindicated. Ukraine won the battle without sacrificing a single one of its warriors. Resilience of decentralized systems. The Swarm's decentralized architecture showed phenomenal survivability under intense fire and electronic warfare conditions. Psychological impact. Encountering a soulless, invisible, and highly efficient enemy deals a devastating blow to enemy morale, causing fear and uncertainty. News of the failed Russian assault and zero losses on the Ukrainian side sparked a wave of enthusiasm among allied nations. This wasn't just a local tactical achievement. It was a vivid demonstration of how technology, intelligence, and the right philosophy of war could defeat brute, archaic force. The battle for Bakhmut was not over, but after that night, one thing was clear. The rules of this battle had changed forever, and these new rules were written by the Iron Swarm. The success of Operation Iron Swarm did not go unnoticed. However, at NATO analysis centers and Joint Operations Planning headquarters, it was well understood that the euphoria of the first victory was dangerous. The Russian war machine, despite its clumsiness and archaic nature, is capable of learning, especially when it comes to survival. The response to this new threat was predictable. Instead of mindless meat grinder assaults, Moscow deployed its few but still existing technological trump cards: electronic warfare, EW systems, and elite sniper pairs. A new phase of the confrontation near Bakhmut began. This was no longer just a battle of robots against infantry. It was a duel of intellects. A duel between the Russian school of suppression, based on brute force, and the Western philosophy of adaptation, flexibility, and innovation. What happened next was an even more vivid demonstration of the superiority of the Western approach, proving that real power in modern warfare is not the strength of a jamming transmitter, but the speed and quality of decision-making. One day after the failed assault, the Russian command changed its tactics. NATO reconnaissance drones detected the deployment of mobile EW systems, the Krasuka and Zhitel, near the front lines. Their task was to create a powerful electronic shield to jam the control channels of the Ukrainian T-Rex units, turning the Iron Swarm into a pile of useless metal. Simultaneously, the best sniper units, armed with large caliber rifles and the latest Russian thermal sights, were moved to the front line. Their mission was to hunt down the robotic platforms. For the Iron Swarm team, the moment of truth had arrived. Could their system, designed primarily to combat infantry, withstand a targeted technological strike? It was here that the fundamental difference in the Western approach to technology became apparent. The Sipol-Gapesa system was not static. It was designed as an open learning architecture. While Russian generals were moving their EW complexes on the map, the Estonian engineer Jan Kross and the Ukrainian operator Pixel were already working on a software patch. In the command bunker, which now resembled a Silicon Valley startup more than a military headquarters, a brainstorming session began. The EW problem. Jan Kross immediately activated the hopping network protocol. The swarm's software began to change control frequencies every second in a pseudo-random pattern across a very wide spectrum. It was impossible to completely jam such digital noise. The Russian EW systems could only create interference, a haze that increased the system's response latency, but did not sever the connection. The sniper problem. The solution to this problem was an example of brilliant tactical improvisation. At Falcon's suggestion, Ukrainian soldiers made a sortie at night and scattered dozens of cheap chemical hand warmers in the gray zone. On the Russian thermal scopes, these warmers created a multitude of phantom targets, mimicking the heat signature of the drones. Russian snipers were forced to waste precious time and ammunition firing at false targets. But the main response was a complete change in the tactics of using the swarm itself. The system shifted from a static defense mode to an active, maneuverable, hunting mode. Falcon and Pixel divided their roles. Pixel controlled the main group of 8 defensive drones, tasked with pinning down the infantry. Falcon, meanwhile, was given command of a separate 3-unit strike team, whose mission was to identify and destroy the most high-value targets. The second Russian attack began in a completely different way. Cautious, well-prepared groups advanced under the cover of sniper fire, while a dense blanket of radio interference hung in the air. The operators in the Ukrainian bunker felt it immediately. The image from the drone cameras became less clear. The response to the joystick commands was delayed. But this time, the Ukrainian side was ready. Pixel, anticipating the delay, began to work preemptively, creating a dense barrage of suppressive fire and forcing the Russian infantry to take cover. Meanwhile, Falcon began his game. His 3 drones, which had been silent until now, began scanning the battlefield for key threats. He soon located a sniper position. Instead of attacking it head-on, he sent a fist loitering munition on a wide arc, flanking the sniper team. They were so engrossed in hunting Pixel's drones that they didn't notice death approaching from their side. The strike was precise and merciless. Enemy sniper fire from that sector ceased. However, the main target, the Russian EW complex, was deep in the rear, beyond the reach of the loitering munition. And it was here that Falcon did what Western analysts would later call an act of tactical genius. Noticing that the signal to his long-range loitering munition was critically weakening due to the jamming, he employed an unconventional solution. He ordered one of Pixel's machine gun drones, which was closer to the front line, to fire tracer rounds not at the enemy, but high into the sky, in the direction of the flying loitering munition. For a few seconds, the ionized trail from the tracers in the air acted as a makeshift relay, reflecting and amplifying the fading control signal. It was enough. Falcon regained control of the loitering munition and guided it to its target, a Tiger armored vehicle with EW antennas. The explosion destroyed the complex, and in that same instant, all the interference in the air vanished. For the Russian forces, it was a shock. They had been confident in their technological superiority in this specific area, but they were outplayed. They were defeated not by power, but by intellect. Information about this battle was immediately classified, but the conclusions drawn at NATO headquarters were unequivocal. Superiority of adaptive tactics. The Western model, based on flexibility, decentralized decision-making, and rapid adaptation, proved its complete superiority over the rigid, hierarchical, and clumsy Russian system. The human factor. As a key element, technology alone does not win wars. Victory comes from the synergy of man and machine. The creativity, intelligence, and ingenuity of the Ukrainian operators were the decisive factor. Vulnerability of brute force. Solutions. Russia's bet on powerful but dumb EW systems and sniper terror failed in the face of smart, asymmetric tactics. The second victory of the Iron Swarm was even more significant than the first. It showed that Ukraine and its Western partners were capable not just of repelling attacks, but of winning in a complex technological duel. It was a clear signal to the Kremlin. For every one of your brute force moves, we will have a smart and unexpected response. The intellectual war near Bakhmut was in full swing, and the West was confidently winning, round after round. The defeat in the technological duel was the last straw for the Russian command. Twice humiliated on a battlefield where they were used to dominating through mass and brute force, they went all in. NATO analysts, monitoring the situation 24/7, detected alarming preparations. The Kremlin decided to resort to its final, most terrifying non-nuclear argument, the TOS-1A Solntsepiok heavy flamethrower system. It was an act of desperation. Unable to defeat the Iron Swarm tactically or technologically, the Russian generals decided to simply scorch the entire square, to wipe both the robotic platforms and their operators off the face of the earth. This decision proved to be a fatal mistake for Moscow. It not only demonstrated the barbaric nature of their warfare methods to the entire world, but also led to a final, crushing defeat that became a symbol of the ultimate victory of intellect over brute force. Operation Iron Swarm concluded not just with another tactical victory, but with a triumph that silenced even the most ardent skeptics in the West and forever changed the landscape of modern warfare. The deployment of the Solntsepiok was taken with the utmost seriousness in the Ukrainian command bunker. A thermobaric salvo from this system leaves no chance of survival in the impact zone. Commander Falcon and his team faced a choice: retreat, saving lives, but ceding the battlefield, or fight a battle that seemed suicidal. The decision made in those moments became the quintessence of Ukrainian resistance and Western military philosophy. They did not retreat. They developed and executed a daring plan that military historians of the future will call the Bakhmut Gambit. The plan was simple in its genius and risky to the point of madness. The bait, Operator Pixel, was ordered to simulate a full-scale counterattack. His 6 T-Rex units charged forward towards the Russian positions, laying down a barrage of fire. The goal was to create the illusion that the Ukrainians, emboldened by success, were going for a breakthrough, and to force the Sontsepyok to move into a firing position as quickly as possible. The Hunter. While all enemy attention was focused on this attack, engineers led by John Cross worked frantically to modify one of the remaining Fist loitering munitions. They stripped it of all extra armor, replacing it with additional batteries. They created a light, ultra-fast interceptor drone with extended range, nicknamed the Swift. The Sacrifice. Commander Falcon took on the most dangerous role. Controlling the last 2 drones, he began to maneuver demonstratively on the flank, drawing fire and attention, buying the Swift precious seconds for its flight. What happened next looked like a scene from a Hollywood blockbuster, but it was harsh reality. The Russian command fell into the trap. Seeing the counterattack, they moved the Sontsepyok into a firing position. At that same moment, the Swift was launched. The Russians, realizing the deception at the last moment, unleashed all their firepower on Falcon's 2 drones, which were serving as cover. On the screens in the bunker, it was visible how his machines were being blown to pieces by a hail of fire. He sacrificed them, but he bought the most important thing: time. At the decisive moment, as the Sontsepyok's launch tubes were already elevating for a salvo, the Swift reached its target. The image from its camera showed the huge vehicle, and then the screen went dark. A moment later, a giant fireball rose into the sky on the horizon. The detonation of the thermobaric warheads destroyed not only the Sontsepyok itself, but everything within a radius of hundreds of meters, including its elite crew and security detail. The effect was like a thunderclap. The Russian forces in that sector, deprived of their main wonder weapon and losing command and control, began a disorderly retreat. The front that they had been trying to break for months crumbled in a matter of hours. Global conclusions and the aftermath of the Iron Swarm's triumph. The news of the rout near Bakhmut and the unique special operation to destroy the Sontsepyok had the effect of a bombshell in world capitals. The consequences of this event went far beyond a single tactical episode. The death of human wave. Tactics. Ukraine and its Western partners clearly demonstrated that they have an effective antidote to Russia's only trump card, its willingness to sacrifice thousands of its soldiers. This completely devalued the Russian mobilization model, a demonstration of technological superiority. The West showed that its strength lies not in the number of tanks or shells, but in the quality of ideas, the speed of innovation, and the superiority of software. The Iron Swarm is a triumph of code, artificial intelligence, and network-centric technologies. A new philosophy of war. At the center of Western military doctrine is the human being, their life, and their intellect. The full power of technology is directed at saving soldiers. Russia, on the other hand, demonstrated that for it, a human is just a consumable. The Iron Swarm became a living rebuke to this barbaric philosophy, a political and moral blow to the Kremlin. The failure near Bakhmut caused a wave of mutual accusations within the Russian military command and undermined faith in the invincibility of Russian weapons. For the whole world, it was a signal that a regime stuck in the tactics of the last century is doomed to defeat when faced with the future. After Operation Iron Swarm, the rhetoric of Western leaders became noticeably tougher and more confident. New aid packages for Ukraine were announced, with a special emphasis on high-tech weaponry, unmanned systems, and artificial intelligence. The success of the Ukrainian warriors and Western engineers inspired defense companies around the world to accelerate their development of robotic systems. The Battle of Bakhmut went down in history not as another bloody slaughter, but as a turning point where the future dealt a devastating defeat to the past. The name of this victory is the Iron Swarm. It is a symbol of how the courage, intellect, and technology of the free world can stop and defeat a tyranny that relies only on brutality and indifference to human life. The consequences of the rout of Russian forces near Bakhmut and the phenomenal success of Operation Iron Swarm continue to ripple across the globe, setting off a domino effect in military headquarters, defense corporations, and intelligence communities. The victory was so convincing that it didn't just change the situation on one section of the front. It became the catalyst that officially kicked off a new, quiet arms race, the race for artificial intelligence and robotic warfare. While Moscow tries to recover from the shock and find an answer to a threat it can neither comprehend nor copy, the West, on the contrary, is launching a full-scale technological offensive. The events of recent weeks have shown that the Iron Swarm was not just a successful experiment. It became the Sputnik 1 moment for the Western Defense Alliance, a signal both alarming and inspiring that has forced a complete rethinking of approaches to the future of war. The Kremlin, by betting on steel and flesh, has found itself in a strategic dead end, while Ukraine and its allies are already laying the foundation for a next-generation army. Psychological collapse on the front line. The first and most immediate result was that a new kind of trench fear began to spread among Russian troops on the front line. According to radio intercepts analyzed by the British GCHQ, Russian soldiers are now less afraid of Ukrainian soldiers than of the silence and the empty field. The Iron Swarm has become a ghost, a legend whispered in the bunkers. Any unidentified object, any discarded piece of metal is now perceived as a camouflaged killer drone. Reports from Russian military counterintelligence, which have fallen into the hands of Western intelligence services, speak of a sharp increase in cases of combat stress and unmotivated refusal to carry out orders in the Bakhmut sector. Soldiers are afraid to go on the assault, knowing they will be met not by a human they can engage in a firefight with, but by a soulless, high-precision mechanism. The psychological effect of confronting a technology they cannot defeat proved to be no less devastating than the physical losses. The Prometheus Initiative, NATO's response. In response to the resounding success of the swarm, a new program was ratified at the last closed-door meeting of NATO defense ministers in Brussels. The Prometheus Initiative. This is a multi-billion-dollar project aimed at accelerating the development and implementation of autonomous and robotic systems in the Ukrainian armed forces and in the armies of the alliance. Scaling production. Leading defense companies such as Rheinmetall, Germany, and BAE Systems, United Kingdom, with the participation of American tech giants, have received contracts for the mass production of upgraded T-Rex 2.0 platforms. The new models will feature improved armor protection, more powerful EW systems, and advanced AI. Creating training centers. 2 training centers for robotic systems operators are being deployed in Poland and Germany. The Ukrainian commander Falcon, whose unique combat experience is recognized as invaluable, has been invited to lead the training program. He will train not only Ukrainian but also NATO soldiers in the new tactics of swarm warfare. Integrating technologies, Pixel and John Cross, who have become celebrities in niche circles, now head a joint Ukrainian-Estonian R&D lab. Their mission is to integrate the Iron Swarm with other Western systems, satellite data, strike drones, and high-precision artillery. The goal is to create a unified, self-learning system of systems, a true Internet of battlefield things. The Kremlin's desperation, scorched earth 2.0. Tactics. Unable to compete on a technological level, Moscow resorted to the only answer available to it, the tactic of total destruction. Russian generals, according to intercepted reports, have developed a new directive, which the West has already dubbed Scorched Earth 2.0. Its essence is simple. If the presence of robotic systems is suspected in a frontline sector, Russian artillery and aviation must methodically, square by square, turn the entire territory into a lifeless lunar landscape. They are no longer trying to fight the drones. They are trying to destroy their very habitat. This barbaric, costly, and extremely inefficient tactic is, in essence, an admission of their own powerlessness. The Kremlin is publicly admitting that it can offer nothing but total destruction in response to a technological challenge. In parallel, Russian intelligence has launched a desperate hunt for the Iron Swarm's technologies, trying to gain access to blueprints or software code through proxy agents and cyber attacks. However, according to the CIA, all these attempts have failed, thanks to the multi-layered cybersecurity system originally implemented by the Estonian specialists. A new strategic reality. The triumph of the Iron Swarm has definitively cemented a shift in the global military paradigm. It has become obvious that the future of wars will be determined not by the number of divisions, but by the quality of algorithms, dehumanizing the battlefield in a positive sense. The Western model has shown how to remove soldiers from the most dangerous line of fire, replacing them with machines. This not only saves lives, but also provides a huge moral advantage. Economic efficiency. The total cost of the Iron Swarm project turned out to be incomparably lower than the cost of the losses suffered by the Russian army in just 1 week of assaults. Technology proved to be not only more effective, but also cheaper than cannon fodder tactics. Russia's strategic dead end. The Kremlin found itself facing a choice without a choice. To continue human wave assaults means guaranteed horrific losses against robotic systems. To apply scorched earth tactics means spending colossal resources to destroy empty fields and definitively cementing its image as a barbaric regime. Thus, Operation Iron Swarm was not just a successful defensive operation. It became a strategic checkmate delivered to the Kremlin on the global chessboard. It exposed the technological backwardness, tactical rigidity, and moral bankruptcy of the Russian war machine. While Russia continues to cling to the past, Ukraine and its allies are confidently building the future. And in this future, victory will belong to those who value intelligence over brute force, and the life of their soldier over imperial ambitions. So, the story of Operation Iron Swarm is more than just a tale of one successful battle. It is a powerful symbol of the tectonic shift happening before our very eyes. It is the story of how the courage and intellect of a free people, multiplied by the technological power of the Western world, can stop and reverse the blind, archaic force of tyranny. The victory at Bakhmut, achieved without a single casualty, was a cold shower for the Kremlin and an inspiring example for the entire free world. It proved that the future of war belongs to smart systems that save soldiers' lives, not to meat grinder assaults that are the hallmark of regimes that value nothing and no one. Now, the West and Ukraine are not just responding to attacks. They are dictating their own rules, forcing the enemy to suffer colossal losses and to admit its technological and moral bankruptcy. The era when you could win a war simply by having more soldiers is gone forever. The era of the Iron Swarm has begun. If you made it to the end, and you, like us, care about this fight for freedom and technology, be sure to subscribe to our channel. This is our first video, and your support is incredibly important to us. It will allow us to continue creating high-quality analysis and covering the key events that are shaping our future. Please like this video to help it reach a wider audience, and write your opinion in the comments. What other technologies do you think could drastically change the course of this conflict? Your feedback helps us understand what interests you most. We are already preparing new material on the failure of Russia's hypersonic weapons program and the latest successes of Ukrainian cyber intelligence. Subscribe so you don't miss it. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in our next report.